I am Grandma Carla's granddaughter, Hannah, and I am going to read more of Missionary Stories with the Miller. And we are at chapter 17, and it is called Martyred at Midnight. It was nearly midnight on a lonely moonlit mountainside in Guatemala. A rocky footpath wound its way between scattered huts and corn patches to the mission house and church building on the top of the ridge. Behind the mission house, a cluster of pine trees sighed and whispered in the rain. Under their shadowy branches, the stealthy forms of several men lurked in the darkness. A faint glow of a cigarette showed in his eyes that smoldered with fanatical hatred. How much longer, Commandant, whispered one of the terrorists in Spanish. He was uniformed in camouflage green and wore a gun strapped to his shoulders. And this right here, see the little arrow pointing to that small country right there? That's where Guatemala is. Right here. Patience, the leader replied briefly. We'll get those missionaries soon enough. Inside the house, the missionary family slept. John Troyer, a tall young American minister, his wife Marie, who provided medical care for the local Indians from makeshift clinics on their porch, and their 5 little children. The luminous pale green hands of the alarm clock beside Marie stood at 10 minutes till midnight. Crash! Bang! The house shook, and as heavy blows pounded upon the front door. Out of the house! Get out with your hands up! Came a roar of angry voices from outside. Machetes slashed at the wooden door as the shouts of hatred slashed the air. Get out! Immediately! Trembling, Marie crept from her bed and peered through the window curtain. John looked over her shoulder, and both gasped. The silvery bright moonlight showed 3 masked men on the porch, chopping at the door. In front of the porch were 6 or 8 more men, the muzzles of their guns pointed towards the house. Get dressed, Marie, quickly, whispered John urgently. There was a hasty knock on the bedroom door, and John Miller, John's young co-worker, burst in breathlessly. What shall we do, John? He exclaimed softly. Is there any chance of slipping out the back door and going for help? John wondered. No, Gary decided. These men surely have our house surrounded. Let's pray. The 3 young missionaries dropped to their knees at the side of the bed. Oh, Father, Gary cried out softly, please keep us safe if it is your will. Forgive any sins in our lives. Crash! A gunshot exploded, splintering open the front door. Get out! Came the shouted command once more. No one will be killed, we promise. Only come out with your hands up. The missionaries looked at each other. There was no escape. John took Marie's hand. Let's get the children, he said. It's cold outside, so wrap a blanket around each one. Carrying their sleeping twin babies, the children led the other children into the dark living room. If only I could wake up and find this all a bad dream, Marie thought, but she knew it was all too real. I'll go out first, Gary volunteered. Picking up 4-year-old Marilyn, he stepped through the open doorway. Immediately, he was surrounded by the terrorists, pointing their machine guns at him from every side. Manos arriba! Hands up, they commanded. Gary wrapped Marilyn's arms around his neck so he could hold his hands in the air as the men searched him for weapons. Holding one baby, Marie took her oldest son's hands and came through the door. Shivering, she pulled the blanket tightly around the baby and stared at the gun barrels all around. Last of all came John, carrying little Timothy. Masked men were busy splashing fuel all over the mission house and Blazer, getting ready to set them afire. Sit on the porch, the leader ordered gruffly. Marie looked beyond into the clear, starry night sky. Somewhere up there, God is watching us too, Marie thought. and her panic was replaced by calm. The terrorist leader faced a little group of missionaries like a cat ready to torment a mouse between its paws. "You have been teaching people evil lies," he declared coldly. "We are going to stop you." "What lies are we telling people?" John asked carefully. "You deceive people," insisted the terrorist. "You put false ideas in their head. You teach them not to help us fight for our rights." "We don't get involved with politics," John answered quietly. "We only teach God's word from the Bible." "I don't believe it," the gunman snapped. "We know you teach evil lies. You come here to our country to oppress the poor Indians. You are rich Americans and you steal from the poor." "How unfair," Marie thought, her eyes filling with tears, as she remembered the countless hours she had spent caring for the sick in her clinic. And what about the times John and Gary had used their four-wheel drive Blazer as an ambulance to take a dying Indian to the faraway hospital? After all that time they had spent trying to teach Indians better farming methods, the school and church they had built, and all the quilts and clothing they had given away free, how could these men accuse them so falsely? "We didn't come to your country to take. We came to give," John said patiently. "If we wanted to get rich, it would have been better to stay in the United States. We came here because we want to help your people. We spend our time serving them so that they can learn about God. You are rich Americans. You are our enemies," the man in uniform repeated stubbornly. "Your house is ready to burn. Come with us now." "Now, down the hill to the church," he ordered. Fingering his gun threateningly, he shoved the missionaries along the trail to the nearby church building. The simple cement block and wood structure was quiet and empty in the darkness. Just a few hours before, smiling Indians had crowded in for the Sunday evening service. Pastor John had stood in the lantern light quoting Philippians 1:21. "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Now the church was dark, and the Indian villagers who had heard the gunshots would be hiding, terrified, in their cornfield. "Set the children down," snapped the guerrilla leader, pointing his gun at John and Gary. "Move over to the fence." "No, please don't hurt them," cried Marie in anguish. "Daddy, Daddy!" shrieked the children. "Can't we let them go?" the gunman asked reluctantly, looking at his leader. "Shoot!" commanded the stern command. The terrorist aimed at John, and the fire flashed from the dark gun barrel as a bullet exploded into the night. Then another and another. Still, the wounded man did not fall. "I can't do it," said the gunman, turning to his commander. Angrily, the leader raised his own gun and stepped toward John. The missionaries prayed aloud. As the missionary prayed aloud, the terrorist squeezed the trigger. Seeing the brave missionary fall at last, his killer whirled and fired at Gary. The bullet tore through Gary's chest. "Into thy hands I commend my spirit," Gary prayed silently as he crumpled into the wet, dewy grass. Lying motionless, he waited for another bullet, but none came. "If I keep still, they may think I am dead already," Gary thought with sudden hope. Eyes closed, he listened alertly. Yes, the voices of the attacking guerrillas were fading in the distance as they trooped off up the trail. Soon the silence was broken only by the weeping of Marie and the children as they bent over John's quiet body. "Daddy is going to be with Jesus," Marie whispered to the little ones. "I want my daddy here," wailed Timothy. "Those men that shoot my daddy are mean. When I get big, I'll shoot them," declared the 5-year-old John Ray. "No, son," Marie sighed. "Even if we had 10 guns in the house, Dad would not have shot back those men. We must love our enemies because that is Jesus' way. Your dad would want us to forgive those men and pray for them." Slowly, Gary pulled himself up and looked around. "Gary!" Marie cried softly as he dragged himself painfully over to the others. "Thank God! I thought you were dead too." She covered the shivering man with a blanket. "I was hit in the chest, but I think the bullet went right through me. Is John dead?" "I'm afraid he's gone," Marie answered softly. Tears ran down Gary's cheek. "I'm sorry, Marie," he groaned. "If only it had been me instead of John." He had 5 children to care for. A chilly wind moaned through the pine trees and around the sad little group on the mountainside. As Gary stared into the darkness, he wondered where the terrorists had gone. Were they still lurking close by? "What shall we do now?" Marie asked. "It's too cold out here for the children, and you're hurt. You can't go back to the house. It's full of spilled kerosene and may explode at any minute." "I think we ought to go over to Pablo's house," Gary decided. "At least it will be warm there, and we will be out of sight." Slowly, the surviving missionaries made their way to the adobe hut where Pablo, a Christian Indian, lived with his family. The doors stood open and the house was empty, but Marie's children could snuggle around the fire and fall asleep at last. Before long, Pablo and his family returned from the cornfield where they had fled to hide at the sounds of shooting. They helped Marie give Gary water and coffee to drink and did their best to make him comfortable. After praying together, they stood in silent grief. Nothing more could be done until morning. It would be too dangerous to venture out on the dark mountain. Whenever Marie closed her eyes, she seemed to see guns and the body of her husband lying so still. "Oh God," her heart cried, "what will I do now?" But God's love was there, and His strength was ready to uphold her. Gently the Spirit whispered comforting spirits to her mind. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God. Romans 8:28. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. Luke 12:7. The night was still dark, but Marie was able to have faith as she waited for John. And this is a historical note. John David Troyer worked in Guatemala for 7 years. He was only 28 when he was shot by terrorist gunmen in 1981. Marie and Gary were rescued by fellow missionaries the next day, and Gary was taken to the hospital. Mary and her children returned to the States to live with her parents, but Gary, after he recovered from his gunshot wound, came back to Guatemala for another term of service. Gary and Mary later married, and Gary became a second father to the Troyer children. The family now lives in North Carolina. In spite of dangers and hardship, the mission in Guatemala have continued to grow. This account of John Troyer's murder has been adapted by the author's permission from the book Awaiting Dawn. To read the rest of the story, order your copy from Christian Light Publications.
Very nice. Thank you for reading to us. And of course, this house is a little bit crazy because this is now one of 7 children. Her brother just came home from the hospital, so everybody's a little bit pinging off the walls, but she did an excellent job reading an excellent story. And so, with Hannah Marie, this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.